When you're done with the audit, you need to do exit interviews. You have to be able to talk about the results. And on the exit interviews, that's where you're going to make sure you get all the facts in the report, make sure everything's correct, make sure the recommendations that you're going to give them as a result of the reports, that they're realistic and cost effective, and maybe even make recommendations as far as when these changes should be implemented, by at least what date would be appropriate. And that's communicating the results of your audit, the very work that you're being paid for, that you need to present as the end package. Now, the presentation and techniques that you use could be what we might call an executive summary. Often that's a very good summary for communicating the ideas of the results without getting into all of the detail that your target audience might not have specific knowledge about or understand what you're saying. You may also consider some visual presentations as well. I like to talk about the PowerPoint rangers, people who can make these really cool slides and make things move and animate. And those types of options. The auditor should discuss the findings of the audit with the management staff prior to talking to the senior management. And maybe it's just considered as a courtesy or reporting chain, but it's important to let management know your results so that they can, basically have an understanding, or maybe they might disagree with you. That's not uncommon, but at least they have the opportunity to be able to maybe present their own rebuttal. But it's at least as a courtesy, you're kind of going to go up the chain. But the big hope is not to get the rebuttal, but to have these meetings to get agreements on the findings, and to use management to help you find a corrective action and to come up with corrective actions that you can then take that and actually use it before the final report as a part of your recommendations. Now, the audit report structure should have an introduction to the report that includes the overall audit objectives and whatever the appropriate limitations were. You should then have your audit findings done in separate sections, finishing with an overall conclusion and opinions. You should make sure that you put the qualifications of all the auditors as they apply to the audit areas. And at the end, have the audit findings and recommendations. Now, remember that auditing is an ongoing process, and after the report has been submitted, you should have follow-up to determine if the appropriate corrective actions have been taken. Now, depending on the level of follow-up, an auditor may have to do yet another follow-up audit to check on the status following the recommendations having been implemented. Now, on the audit documentation, the minimum things that should be included with the audit documents are things like the planning and preparation of the audit scope and objectives, because that's kind of the guideline that's going to explain the rest of the report. You should have the descriptions or walkthroughs on the scope of the audit area as part of the documentation, your audit program, the audit steps that you performed, the evidence gathered. Now, in a way, this is basically keeping a log of all of your activities, every single step you did, so that you can, number one, if you did a good enough documentation, somebody can read it and follow the same steps and hopefully come up with the same conclusions. Any services or other auditors or experts outsourcing that you might have used. You should have all of the findings of your audit, the conclusions and recommendations with the documentation, and include, of course, the relevant identification and dates, or I should say the audit documentation with relation to the document dates and identification of that document should all be a part of what you submit. Basically, what is it called? When? How do I identify it? How do I name it, label it? When did it occur?